Welcome to the Word Weaver podcast, a literary place in cyberspace where I share tangible tips, tricks, and words of wisdom to help you achieve your dream of writing a book. I'm your host, Louise Johnson, a writer and the author of Behind the Red Door. Let's dive into today's chapter. So welcome back to the Word Weaver podcast. I'm very excited to introduce our first author guest of season 2. It is Lauryn Chamberlain. She is a Northwestern grad and a Brooklyn-based author of Friends from Home and Who We Are Now. And I feel very lucky to also call her a friend. Lauryn, welcome to the Word Weaver podcast.
Thanks, Louise. I am so excited to be here with you. Like I said, there's nothing more fun than a bookish podcast, but a book podcast with a friend is tops. Like we can talk about anything. So excited to be.
100%. I know. Before I even pressed record, we were just kind of catching up because, so Lauryn, you just moved back. I say recently, but it wasn't that recently. A lot has gone on in both of our lives. We were starting to catch up.
I don't think, whatever. I wasn't working on my current book 3 yet. You didn't have a baby yet. Things were different. But I did move. I moved from Toronto back to New York in, I guess, November of last year. So that means it's been, like 7 months now?
Oh my God. See, time flies. I feel like you just left, but a lot of things have happened.
Lots has happened. I'm back and forth a lot too still. So I'll have to try to come see you next time I'm up. I'm hoping end of August.
Do you want to walk us through how we met? Because I actually think it's a very nice, when I was thinking about it, I was like, it's a nice little meet cute and a way for people. It's kind of like a good advice and a good reminder of how you can actually build literary community without it being like icky networking.
Yeah, it's so true. And you know what? Correct me if I get this wrong. So I feel like I've always known you at this point, but I think about, so a little bit post-pandemic era, either 2021 or 2022. I was on Instagram, and I guess I don't even remember how I had found you. We know some writers in common, and so maybe I had followed you or clicked over to your profile because of that, right? Just a couple other people I had known casually online in the Toronto author community. And I saw you post an Instagram story that you were at Soho House, Toronto, and I had joined and had been going there. And you know what? I thought about it, and I was like, I'm just going to shoot my shot. Like, she seems cool. Her book seems interesting. I was like a guy sliding into your DMs. I was like, I see you go to the same, come here often. And so, yeah, I literally sent a DM and was like, hey, do you belong? Do you go there? Do you write there? I would love to, meet up sometime for a coffee or a drink. And you were so sweet, how you always are. And we're like, yes, absolutely. Even though like I have no clue who you are. And yeah, we met up, and I feel like it was very kismet from like the first time that we hung out. We stayed for like 3 hours.
100%. That's how I would describe it too. But also so funny because you're not supposed to photograph or film in Soho House.
You're not supposed to talk about it on public facing podcasts.
Oh my God, it's fine. And the funny thing is, I'm not even a member. That I was just so excited. I was meeting my literary agent there.
That's right. You were just meeting somebody, and you were like, actually, well, I'm not a member, but I'll come back with you. And I was like, great.
Yeah, it shows I'm not a member because I was posting about it, which is now so embarrassing. But it was, like you said, kismet. As soon as I met you, I feel like we've been friends forever. And I just really love, because a lot of people, like, you don't DM other girls that often, and you weren't super new to Toronto at that point. What brought you to Toronto originally from the States?
Yeah, I wasn't new at that point. I think I'd been there a couple of years. So for those who don't know, I know you know, but I moved to Toronto in December 2019 for my now husband, James. We were, I guess, just dating at the time, but we had a long international love story, and he ended up in Toronto doing his PhD. I'd been living in New York, and it was either do long distance for like 5 to 6 more years, or me move to Toronto because I had the more flexible work. And so ultimately I got there thinking, but I'll go back and forth to New York once a month, easy. And of course it's January 2020. So 2 months later, couldn't go back to New York for about a year and a half. So that was a wild time, but it's also because of that I didn't know a ton of people in Toronto. Like as soon as I moved there and kind of meant to start making contacts, you couldn't actually meet up with anybody. So it wasn't until, 2 years later when I was kind of finally getting back out there. And that's also part of why I messaged you. I was like, I need to meet some writers here. I had known a lot in New York, and it turned out to be great.
Yeah, you had a whole community in New York, and then the pandemic hits and you're just cooped up. I can't even imagine moving to a new city, a new country, and not being able to even meet up for coffee or know anyone. So kudos to you. I don't even think I really thought of it like that when we first met, but we hit it off. We both love and lived in New York, so we
Yeah.
had that in common. And our first books also came out within weeks of each other in the middle of the pandemic when bookstores were
Yes.
closed.
May 2021, you wait your whole life to write your first book, and then we couldn't even go do the in-person events and stuff. I know, we had the same experience.
It was tragic. I know, but I absolutely loved your book, Friends from Home. That was your first book in 2021, like you said, May. And then Who We Are Now just came out this past year. Well, I guess now
It's
2023.
almost a year. Who We Are Now turns one on August 8th. Wild.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah, that's so true. What for you was the difference in publishing a book during the pandemic versus then now getting to publish a book 20 August 2023, bookstores are open. Did it feel like another debut? Walk us through that
Yes.
whole experience for both book launches.
Yeah, it was I mean, night and day different. I can't wait for you to have the same experience. I'm not going to force you to out secrets on your podcast, but one of these days,
Offline.
offline. But no, it was a night and day experience, honestly. It really did feel like a debut. I had my launch event in New York. So I came back here and did it at Book Club Bar, which is a combination wine bar and bookstore. And so loved it. Had to have drinks for my launch. So it was great to get to do that and kick it off in New York in conversation with my friend Becky Chalson, who is incredible. And then about the second event. I did Toronto. You moderated, thank you, and got
I
to
was honored.
the local people, and that was really fun. And then I did my hometown, which I'm originally from a small town in Michigan, and we did the local bookstore event that all of my like seventh grade teachers came to, and that was hilarious. I got to
Oh,
see
that's
everybody and catch up, like
that's
very
the best. They're probably so proud of you.
it was so adorable. Yeah, she's like, I don't know if you remember me. I taught you English. I'm like, of course I remember you.
Of
Like,
course, look what happened to me. I turned out to be a
yeah,
writer.
they're all so great. So no, I mean, getting to do like little mini tour, there was just more. No one knew, but even in 2021, I mean, I feel even worse for our 2020 debut friends, but even by early 2021, no one really knew how to handle like the virtual launches. Like we were doing them, but it was hard to know how many people would come. I had good turnout because it was my first book and my friends all came, to the virtual launch event in partnership with a New York bookstore. But it just doesn't feel the same as getting to meet the readers, like see friends in person. And I was honestly surprised. I thought my New York event would be just all people who knew me, which was going to be fine. But I did have a few people who had read my first book, like a mother and daughter who had read from Home together and decided to come. And I thought that's so sweet and special.
Oh, that's so nice. I know you can't replicate meeting people in person and readers in person with the
Yeah,
online experience. And yeah,
completely.
for your first launch, when you launch online, everyone was saying, oh, but during COVID, people are reading more. But what I found is people are reading established authors that they already knew. But for us,
Exactly.
big debut like yours, it's exciting, but it's hard to get noticed online when it's your first book. We aren't.
Completely. Yeah. No, but nobody knew me. It didn't blow up on BookTok. It just like it wasn't the moment. And Who We Are Now got a lot better traction, whether it's just because hopefully your career builds and it's the second book, or whether it was because of the in person or just the book hitting right for the moment. I don't know, but it was a lot of fun.
I want to talk about who we are now. And then I also want to go into your whole writing craft and routine and pick your brain, the literary scene in Brooklyn, because I am so envious of the life you are currently living.
It's such a small community. It's hilarious.
Okay, yeah. So you moved from Toronto back to New York, then you moved to Brooklyn.
Yes.
You have the coolest apartment ever. You're living my dream life.
I don't know. You have a pool. We'll discuss later.
I would trade my pool, but for your Brooklyn loft right now. It's so cool.
Grass is always greener. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not kidding. If you ever go out of town and you're looking for somebody to rent, I will move
True.
in. What is the literary scene like in New York, in Brooklyn these days? How is it different from Toronto? I'm dying to know.
Yeah. So I mean, it's so cool. Like I've gotten so lucky. I think my agent represents a lot of, shout out to Allison Hunter. We love you. She represents quite a few women writers who mostly live in Brooklyn. So like, I don't know, I've reconnected with Hannah Orenstein, who's written 5 books, including Head Over Heels, which I loved. If you want an Olympics book tie-in, shout out to that one from a couple of years ago. Yeah. So I just kind of really easily fell back in with, some people that I'd maybe been online acquainted with before or met once, who my agent also represents. And I find that community really supportive. Like I think there's a little bit I don't know. My original friends in writing in New York were all young adult authors. Best friend Arvin Amati and his latest book, How It All Blew Up, and he has new ones coming. So I was in that kind of circle, and there was a little bit of a rap that in YA people knew each other better, but that adult fiction could be a little bit more distanced, and that there wasn't a community around it in the same way. Maybe because it didn't feel like there was on social media, at least at that time, like 5 to 10 years ago.
Did you feel like there was also more of a competitive feeling between
I have
authors?
never felt that, but I have heard there are people that talk about it, and I obviously see, few and far between some instances of that feeling a little bit like it's more the case. But among the authors that are like my age who are like working authors, it's not just the big debut. They're in it for a career, they're building a career, they're doing other cool initiatives just like podcasts, newsletters, things like that. I think we all really root each other on. So there's that kind of group that I has been brought together through sharing an agent and then just kind of our friends that we also have, and that's always really fun to get together and write. It feels like, I mean, this, like it's such a cliche. You flip to the back page of a book and it's like so and so is an author living in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So there's just a million of us. I've met, new great people like Becky Chelson is somebody that I've connected with. Her book Serendipity came out this spring. She's great. And then the fun thing I was going to tell you, I don't even know if I should out this on a podcast before I respond to
Please
the
do.
Okay, did you read The Love Affairs of Nathaniel P. by Adele Waldman ever?
No, I haven't.
Okay, that is one of my favorite books. It came out like 12 years ago. You
Okay, I'm writing
absolutely
it.
must read it. You will love it. But she had that book and that was like a bestseller. And then she just 10 years later came out with her next book called Help Wanted, which is really interesting too, totally different type of thing. And I'm a fangirl of her. I was like, I would die to meet this person, but we're not really connected. She is a good bit older than me. I was like, I don't want to just blind send her an email as we were talking about, before trying to make the connecting happen organically. And then I was out in my neighborhood watching a basketball game by myself a couple months ago. And
As one does.
as one does, love, go Celtics, shout out to the Celtics. I was sitting at the bar by myself, just watching the game, and a guy sat down next to me and started talking to me. And I was kind of like, oh boy, like here we go. Like there were a lot of guys trying to come in and mansplain the sports to me. But
Of
this guy
course.
turned out to be a writer turned lawyer, not really a novelist, but had actually a PhD in poetry, just really interesting guy. We end up chatting about writing, we're neighbors. And I don't know how it comes up that he's good friends with Adele Waldman, this author. And I was like, I would die to meet her. I can't believe it. Swapped
Oh,
emails. He just put me on an email chain with her yesterday. I was like, oh, we're all, Fort Greene, Prospect Heights people. Like, let's all get together. Let's grab a coffee. Lauryn and Adele, you should meet. And I was like,
what?
so that's how it happens here, just a regular casual drink out at the bar, meet a friend of your author hero, get coffee, I guess.
Oh my God, that is exactly why I love Brooklyn and New York writers. Like you don't even hear of that anymore. Kind of you're sitting at a bar, nobody
Yeah,
talks to each other.
no,
You're just so
exactly. Well, that's New York culture in general, though. I really find that people do always talk to each other. Because I do a lot of like, I want to just grab one drink and read, or like I want to write at like whatever. And not that people interrupt you, but like I do go, like I love dinner at the bar by myself, things like that. And people are pretty friendly. I've met a ton of people that way. So New York just has that conversational vibe, I think.
it is. There's so many people there that you don't feel intimidated going, like you said, to sit at a bar alone, have a martini, read a
Yeah.
book. There's something so sexy about that.
No, there so is. And like I said, yeah, lots of like fun happenstance connections that way. And then also it's just, I don't know, I've been to a lot of launch events. It's always fun. Becky Chelson's launch at Books Are Magic in Brooklyn was just honestly magic, like phenomenal Q&A. We went to the backyard of like local restaurant for the after party. Just had pizza and wine and spritzes. And it was just, yeah, you look around and you're like, this is what I thought it was going to be like. When I was a kid, when I imagined like growing up and being a writer, there are those little moments where it feels like what you think it was going to feel like.
Fulfills all the romantic notions of being kind of a writer in that scene. And everyone really is so supportive, like you said.
Yeah. But I want to give a shout out to the Toronto community too, because frankly, like I had a very similar experience in that the way that I started meeting a lot of writers ultimately, other than you, my blind DM, was I was at Indigo Bay Bloor. And I think I was maybe signed. I don't know. I just had a couple. They had a couple new copies of Friends from Home in that I was going to sign. And I saw Marissa, the author of Lucky, New York Times bestseller, our mutual
Reese's,
friend.
yeah, Reese's book club pick.
Exactly. And she was in signing books and I went up to her and I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited to meet you. And she was so lovely and nice. And we swapped emails and then she started inviting me to some of those Toronto women's writer dinners that I know you've also been to. So I don't want to say I never want to talk about it like I think that scene is specific to Brooklyn, even though, yes, that is kind of like the cliche and it really is awesome. But, I've been lucky that everywhere I've gone, writers have been really supportive of one another.
So if you're a writer out there listening to this, or you're a bookstagrammer or a book talker and you want to start kind of going to more events, meeting
Yeah.
authors, getting inspiration, really just follow your curiosity and don't be shy. Lauryn is a perfect example of sliding into the DMs of your favorite author. There's nothing like connecting over a book.
Yeah.
It's something so wholesome about it that we're all readers at heart. We're all in this kind of weird industry together. It's all about solitude. We're all
Mhm.
alone behind our computers. Then there's a sense of community where we're all craving to go out and kind of talk shop and what are you working on and how is it going? And it's really just supporting each other through this really weird career that we've all chosen because we love writing.
Exactly. And yeah, that's the main advice, if I ever sometimes I do get DMs or emails asking, for advice for aspiring writers. And that's one of the things I always say is like, go to the stuff, like wherever you live, if it's whether, go to your local bookstore, go to an event where an author's in town, actually ask them a question, slide into the DMs. Don't be afraid, because I think there's this perception that we don't want to connect, or if you haven't already made it, that people aren't going to give you the time of day. And, there's always a couple jerks in every industry, but like 99% of the time, that's not true. I talk to people in the DMs all the time, and I'm sure you do. And then even these people that I think of as like so famous are always, so kind when I've gone up to them. So yeah, be there, be at the events, don't be afraid.
100%. That is the best advice, really, it is.
I'm putting the word out. I'm like, if anybody wants to introduce me to Meg Wolitzer right now, I'm available for that as well.
I also think there's an even playing field because every new book that you write, we're all starting from page one, from a blank page. It's still the same feeling. So don't be intimidated to talk to your favorite authors. And I just think that's the most important is, like you said, be around the stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I always add with that, like, be around the stuff, not in a networky way. Like, obviously, yes, that's part. Be around the stuff because you love it. Like, if you don't love going to bookstores, if you don't love going to book events, if you don't love like striking up a conversation about a book, you're in the wrong profession. Like if you genuinely love that stuff, that's going to come through, and people are going to see that.
100%. That's such a good point because networking can be so icky. There is a
Yeah.
really gross feeling, and you can tell, everyone can
Yeah.
tell when someone's just trying to buddy up with an author or reaching out to pick their brain when it's not coming from a genuine place. It's more of trying a selfish place of trying to get somewhere. Everyone can see that and read it from afar when it's not genuine. So, yes, that's a very, very good point. Well, I want to talk about who we are now because it's set in New York City in the early aughts, which is a time period that we both kind of came of age in the
Yeah.
city. For the book, were you inspired by your own personal experience of living through that time? How did kind of the whole idea generate for you for that book?
Sure, yeah. So if for anyone who doesn't know, Who We Are Now follows four friends who meet at Northwestern, which is where I also went to school in the Chicago area. Then upon graduation in 2006, three of the four of them moved to New York City to pursue their various ambitions. And the book follows kind of the next 15 years of their lives as two of them become really successful in their chosen creative fields, and two of them maybe don't, or take a kind of different path than they expected when they were in school. So that's the book. And yes, obviously, I drew on real experiences that I'd had. You and I both know, like being in, I don't know, being in New York in that time period of 2008, 2010, 2014, like that. It's a lot of that stuff that we all remember from coming of age. And so one thing in particular is that one of my characters, none of whom are based on me, people always ask that. It's like, no, that would be so uninteresting. I am not interesting enough to be a book character. None of them are really me, but some of the real life details crept in. And one of the characters, Rachel, is a fact checker at New York Mag in that period, kind of as her first job. So was I. Rest in peace to the magazine industry of pre 2014. But
Oh my
yeah, I
God.
had that experience too. So just some of those details of like what it was like in, a magazine or a newsroom at that time period. It was fun pulling out some just of those tiny anecdotes, even just for one small section.
I feel like with all characters in fiction, everyone always thinks, like you said, one is must be based on you, the author. But I feel
Yes.
like you sprinkle parts of yourself into all four of the main characters, whether you
Yes.
mean to or not. At least they're interested in something that might have piqued your interest.
For sure. And even in Who We Are Now, it's two men, two women, Nate, Dev, Rachel, and Clarissa. So none of them are me. All of them are me. And I don't know. I did a lot of research for this book too, which I know we talked about at our launch event, because even though it's recent history, just like there were things about like the financial collapse in 2008 that I didn't know. I had a character working at Lehman Brothers, like a lot of fun research too. So a lot of non-real life experiences from me. But I don't know. I always tell people when they ask who don't write, who ask if characters are based on real people, I always say, like, they're not. I think you can write a million things you've never experienced, but I'm not sure you can write an emotion you've never felt. So I think there's always like the core emotional truth of like, we all know what it's like to feel jealous. We all know what it's like to bomb something. We all know what it's like to feel proud, and kind of using that as the core of the truth. And then, yeah, you can get to all kinds of places and mistakes and journeys and interests that don't pertain to you at all.
And that's how you create real three-dimensional characters because they're pulled on truths, but not fully who you are. I
Yeah.
also like how you said too, isn't it funny? Doesn't it make you feel kind of old that this book is technically considered historical
I know.
fiction set
I'm
in the
dying.
early
Yeah.
2000s?
It's 2006 to 2019. It's like the idea of that as historical is both hilarious and also, I mean, pre-COVID, that does feel like a million years ago, right? Like
Very
that whole
true, actually. It does.
yeah. That's a long
That,
time ago.
yeah, 100%. Time stood still, but then that
Yeah.
also feels very long ago. So
Yeah.
another thing about this book, it's multi-POV, like you said, there's four main characters. I'm very curious how you chose to structure the book this way because I think it was very clever. Each chapter is 1 year and it's told through one character's point of view. So
Yeah.
how did you come to that decision? Because one of the things I really liked is as it's kind of coming of age, I felt like time mimicked how it does, the way the chapters kind of sped up with everyone's lives. So just tell me about that structurally, because that's something I grapple with of what point of view, how am I going to kind of move through time with a narrative plot?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the book was always multi-POV, third person limited, and it always rotated. I knew I wanted, the to be in the head or from the perspective of all four of the friends instead of telling it through one person's perspective. I love the way that people's remembrance of events clashes. I love like the dramatic tension of this person knows something that this person doesn't, and I love how you can really see that through multi-POV. That
Hmm.
said, I can take no credit for the, effectiveness of the structure of 1 year from each character's point of view. You know this already, but that was my editor's idea. I turned in a draft that was more similar, not in writing style, but structurally to The Interestings by Meg Wolitzer, if anyone's read that, which is that you kind of rotate in and out of third person POVs at random, just kind of whose you want to be in, or like each person just gets a turn. It
Hmm.
wasn't aligned to, 2006 is from Rachel's perspective, 2007 from Dev, etc. It wasn't organized that way. And my editor said, hey, I know this is going to be a really big revision. I think she was kind of scared to tell me, but it would just give it so much structure and just like flow to put it this way. Like each year is from one character's perspective, and then we rotate through again and again because the book is in 3 sections.
Yeah.
And I knew as soon as she said it that she was right. Like I was like, oh no. Like, when you hear a big note and you're like, yeah, that's absolutely the right thing to do. So that was a huge revision. I think I told her because everything was in the wrong perspective then. Like the narrative events of the book were not necessarily going to change, but
Right.
something told from Deb's perspective now belongs in year 2006 from Rachel. And that it had a domino effect that like changed everything about the book. And I said I could do it in like 8 weeks, I think. And I think nobody believed me. But I was going on a trip to Europe to go sailing on my friend's boat in France. And I was like, this will be done before that. Like, I am not taking this on the boat at all. And so, yeah, I did it in like 6 really intense weeks.
So impressive. Nothing like a reward of going
Yeah.
sailing to get your butt in gear and get you doing those edits.
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
curious that when you were speaking about your editor and that relationship, well, first of all, which do you prefer, the drafting or the editing phase? Like, does it scare you when you get a really big note from your editor thinking, oh God, I have to fully revise this whole book?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Lou, is it fair to say I like whichever one I'm not currently in? Like, am I ever happy? Like when I'm drafting, I can't wait to be editing. When I'm editing, I'm like, well, I didn't become a writer to revise, and I'm like already trying to cheat with the next project. Like it's absolute chaos. I do think that if I had to pick, and I have a phenomenal editor currently, I had a 2 book deal for my first 2 books. So shout out Cassidy Sachs at Dutton. She's incredible. I think that books, and I'd love to hear your take on this too. I do think books become books in the editing. We all got into writing because we have ideas, because we like to write, because we like to tell stories. But I always think of those as like skeletons. Whatever it is that I produce is a skeleton that like needs the shading afterward, and editing and revising and adding is the shading. And that's like when it becomes a book. That's when you make the thing that people are ultimately going to see. And I think everybody thinks you make it in drafting. At least for me, you really don't. Like I've got a skeleton that I've got to put flesh and clothes on after a draft or two. So I guess I would say slight preference for the editing because that's when I really start to believe in it. I love to get a great note. I love to say, okay, no, I think we're really going to be able to do this. But it's not fun either. When I don't know, there's some days when writing is fun, and then there's some days when it's brutal. So I don't know. Either or, pick your day. One could be phenomenal or terrible, but I do think editing is where the book obviously comes together. So I do like that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I
Okay.
I
Yeah,
really
you
like your
you're
analogy
editor.
too of the skeleton.
Yeah.
That's a good way of thinking about it. And the editor author relationship is so important because in the editing phase, your editor comes in with fresh eyes and they can see things that you couldn't see. You're too close to it. So it's very hard to
Mhm.
kill your darlings
So true.
at that stage. So I think that's why an editor really is crucial.
I'm too close to it. Like if I were to read it like 6 months later, I'd probably know. But when you go back and read it like right after you wrote it, it's pretty tough. That's why beta readers are so important, especially if you're not agented or have an editor yet. Like somebody other, you don't need to let in 20 people, but like somebody other than you who reads a lot in the genre or is a writer needs to be looking at it after a certain point because it's too hard for you to see it yourself.
Absolutely, 100%. For both of your books, what I really love are the titles. They're so catchy.
Thank you.
Friends from Home, Who We Are Now.
Thank
Who
you.
comes up with your book titles? And also, you have very gorgeous, eye-catching cover designs as well. Can you walk us through both of those processes?
Sure, yes. We got so lucky on both those counts. But yeah, so Friends from the titles are different. It depends. Friends from Home is once again my editor slash agent's title. And I loved it. As soon as we went through a lot on the title for that one because I sold it. No, I queried it as being called Till Death because if you don't know Friends from Home, there is a wedding. There is some drama over a best friend's wedding. And I liked the idea of Till Death Do Us Part, and also like just communicating that the book was definitely like heavier than a rom-com. It's definitely a coming of age in your 20s story with some heavy topics and themes. And so I liked the kind of darker title, but everyone was going, no, people are going to think this is a thriller. You can't do it.
Till
So then,
Death, yeah.
yeah, then we sold it. Yeah. So we changed it from queried and got my agent with the title Till Death. Then she changed it to Maid of Honor. I think that's what we sold it as. And then we didn't want to do the announcement until we had the real title. And so we were on these like endless title brainstorming things. And I think we wanted to do the other's gold, like as in make new friends, but keep the old one is silver and the other's gold. And then a book came out like with that title, like the week that we had landed on it or
The
something.
worst.
Oh no. Kind of riffing, I think, on Friends from College, which is a TV show. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Only had 2 seasons, but was really
Yep.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah, and then I think we came. What about Friends from Home? We all like knew that that was the title, and we agreed on it. And great. Who We Are Now, on
Obsessed.
the other hand, that's mine. That's the title that has had as a working project since 2017, which is like before I
Wow.
even sold my first book. I wrote the opening to Who We Are Now. When I thought I might put Friends from Home in a drawer and never do anything with it, I was like, this is going to be my next book, and I wrote the first. What's now, I guess, the kind of intro section where they're all in college. I wrote that like 7 years ago. And I from that day, I was like, this book is called Who We Are Now. And mercifully, my editor liked that. She's like, I think that's great. Well, just so we didn't have to do the title process. My cover art, I can take no credit for. Phenomenal, wonderful designers and creative team at Penguin Random House and within Dutton, of course. We did a couple iterations on Friends from Home and landed where we landed, and then went a different illustrated direction for Who We Are Now, which I'm obsessed with. Like, I know it's my own book, but like, it's my favorite cover. Like, I think it's
Obsessed.
incredible. And I know you know this, we actually had a different cover first for Who We Are Now, which I also loved. They were both illustrated, but it was a little bit more abstract. It didn't have any of the New York City scene on it that Who We Are Now has. And so we all liked that one,
Hmm.
but this happens in the book process. I don't know how much you're supposed to talk about this, but I don't care. Sometimes you will get feedback from booksellers that they would love to see another direction on the cover. And from my understanding, that's a good thing. It means they like the book, but it just may not be totally lining up to trends they're seeing or representative of like what they're really seeing do well in the market. And so if you have a big bookseller like in the US, like Barnes and Noble or Target,
Hmm.
say, hint, hint, we'd love to see a new direction. I think that kind of implies like we might be bought in, but like we want to see, more of X, Y, or Z. So we did another pass and ended up with this gorgeous cover. Thrilled. So happy that we did that.
I think that's so good. That's part of why I wanted to do this podcast is to demystify the publishing process. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I think is very interesting for people to know is that you do get feedback from booksellers on cover, and that it really isn't, a lot of people think the author is behind the cover design, that you get
Right.
final say. I mean, you do get a say, like you
Yeah, we
said,
provide
like,
feedback. My agent and I get together and talk about it. What's funny is, I mentioned the boat trip earlier after I'd turned in Who We Are Now with the revision. The first cover for that came in while I was on the boat in the middle of nowhere. And so I didn't respond to the email. And my agent is calling, like, do you hate it? And I was like, no, I'm just out to sea. I haven't even looked at it. So you provide feedback and you do some rounds, but it's not the author's call, as you know.
dying to know. This is my favorite part to talk about on every Word Weaver podcast episode, but it is getting into the nitty-gritty of your writing routine, your weird quirks, any rituals. How does the magic happen?
I love talking about this because you are a person with such a process, I think, Lou. And I want to talk about that especially now too that you have a baby in your life. Because it does, change things and you have to be adaptable. But you are like my lighthouse, my North Star, like a person that I think of as like having a writing practice and like things to, I am like a person that's like, oh well, I guess I gotta write this morning. I like do 20 minutes like before I do something else. And then like, I don't know. But I guess the way that I wrote my first book and the way what I do when I am really drafting or really on a deadline is I'm a mornings person. I don't want to be. I think it's so romantic to be like sipping a scotch like by the fire writing late at night. My friend Arvin is that kind of author, like
Oh,
he's like a night owl like late at night like the life of the writer like that you imagine. But no, I'm useless after 3 p.m. for stuff that's actually like truly intense brain power. So I like to get up on a Saturday and just, head to the coffee shop. I like to like be somewhere outside of my home a lot of the time when I'm drafting. Get there, get a coffee, sit down, try to I'll try to hit a certain word count, reward myself with a break, hit a little bit more if I'm feeling it. And, that really worked for me, especially like in my 20s with my first book, where I think it felt so unachievable. I'm like, I can't be writing every day, or how do you write with a day job? Those kind of things. If you really just dedicate like 4 hours once a week, you will go slower. But like if you were really methodical and serious about that time, it will eventually happen. And again, as someone in my 20s, that allowed me to like live a whole writing life before my friends even woke up and were like ready to get brunch. So that was kind of my hack for book one. And I do still like to do that. So I'm definitely a morning writer, definitely love to have a coffee with it, reward myself with like a break or a treat. Those are the main things. It's just like I have to do like butt in seat, like be methodical about getting it done and getting it done in the early part of the day when I'm on deadline. But the only thing that I think I'm kind of weird about is how much I hate writing at home. Like I don't know, you'll have to tell me about yours, is that even whether it's what I have right now, which is not a great office setup at all. But like even when I did have that with a desk, I was still like I felt like I was in writer jail when I was like at home. Like I was like, I don't like this. So I am big on the being out. I have done actually a little bit of early evenings lately too. Then the treat is like a spritz, but and then some are like outside. Like it's a little hard to see the laptop, but I will like laptop outside. I have a courtyard at the building where I live, so I've written in the courtyard a little bit. Yeah, getting out of the house, feeling like it's like breaking the monotony kind of is great. And then also, yeah, just being serious about scheduling the time and doing it, even if you don't. Obviously, we know like you can't wait to feel like it. Like you schedule the times and you get in there and you do it. And even if the work isn't feeling like it's flowing, it's just about being there and showing up. Eventually, it'll happen.
like you said, putting your butt in chair. But
Yes.
no, I'm actually envious of your writing routine because I feel like that's actually the way most people should go about it. So it's not so daunting and overwhelming and everything has to be perfect and in
Yeah.
place. It's really simple. You just sit butt in chair and hit a certain word count before your friends wake up and have brunch. You've already kind of had your writing day. It's like
Yeah.
you're stealing time in that
Yeah.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
What is your word count that you have to hit every day?
It's so interesting because it really varies. And also, I'm going to be scandalous and get everyone mad at me. I'm not an everyday writer. If I had to do it like 6 or 7 days a week, I wouldn't do it. It's the same thing as like running. I've figured out like I'm like, what isn't achievable? Like you can't be lazy. Like I'm not going to do like once in a while, like when the mood strikes, once a week. You have to be more serious about it if you want to finish a project on deadline. But
Hmm.
I know that like I will just like hate it if I feel like it's something that I have to do every day. Like those rest days are important. Wanting to come back to it is important. Space from the work is important. I would say that I'm trying right now to average, and this is not crazy. I know people who do this in a day that write these fantasy epics. I'm at like 5K a week right now, I think.
Okay.
So
That's
that
very
like
achievable.
yeah, it's like that's what I mean is like I'll do better doing that than if I tell myself I have to do 2,500 words a day, 5 to 7 days a week. Like I don't know. That's just what works for me. And that pace is getting me to like a draft and outline proposal of my new book by the end of August. And that's like where I want to be at. So that's
Very
what
scandalous of you.
I know, not an everyday. I'm not an everyday person, but I don't know. I went to a launch event recently. I won't name names. They are the most fabulous people, but two authors who do write like in the fantasy and young adult like fantasy space.
Hmm.
And they were talking like, about how like you just can't pull them away like from their laptop. Like they'll write 20,000 words in a day. It's like they need to change. Like they don't really have good balance. I'm like, sue me for being too balanced. I guess maybe I should be a little bit more ambitious. I'm not sure.
No, I think that's a healthy message though, that you can be just as ambitious without burning yourself out. That's part of, it sounds like they're part of that big hustle culture of if you're not grinding, if it's not painful, then you're not actually a real author.
I know. Yeah. And I don't even know that they meant that, but just like, no,
No.
I get so invested in it that like I can't drag myself away. And look, we have all had those days. Like I do have days when the writing, like when it's really hitting and it's like time travel. Like I've been writing for a few hours and I didn't even like realize quite how much I've done. But those are few and far between. Most of the time I'm just like in there to do what I know I need to do that day. And then later, like I said, maybe that is more the like, is the magic in the drafting or the revising? And I guess I think I'm definitely like the magic is in the revising when I get to go back in, see what I did. Maybe it wasn't the most creatively engaged that day, but I've got something now that I can work with and I can see the shape of it and put like the touches on it that I want. And I guess, yeah, that's just the way I work.
No, I love that. I just have to ask though, are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you go in at all with any sort of outline or handwritten notes in a notebook, or it's just you and your laptop at a coffee shop?
I literally just made myself sound like such a plotter because I was like, no, it's just about being methodical. It's about getting done what you need to get done that day. I'm such a pantser. Like, I don't know. I'm like I'm some of both. Like I have to be really clear and intentional about the time. And then if I'm drafting on a schedule, then the word count. But I don't really go in with a hardcore outline. I always know the beginning of my books and the end of my books. I wouldn't sit down to write something if I didn't know where it started and ended, basically, because it's that journey that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
But I won't know what the beats are of that until like I get doing it. So I would definitely say I'm a pantser. I set the time, I go to the coffee shop, and then like whatever happens that day happens.
I think that's part of the fun of writing is
Yeah.
discovering it as you go. And I'm becoming more of a, I'm obviously, I mean, as you know, a huge plotter.
Yeah, I'm envious of that. I love it.
The
But
grass isn't always greener. I'm trying to become more of a pantser because I do have more fun. I want writing, it's about the journey, not the destination.
yeah,
I want the journey to be fun. And I think being what you're doing is so dreamy and amazing, and you get to explore and play every single morning when you sit down and write.
I agree. Yeah. But I want to hear it too. I know you're the podcaster here, but I want to hear a little bit more about your process and what aspects of it, I guess, are still serving you in this new season of life and what parts of your process might change or that you're struggling with because you are my listeners don't know, you are my lighthouse and my person who speaks so honestly about like writing, motherhood, deciding if you want children. I hope this is fine to go there because you went there a lot in your first
Oh,
podcast episode
absolutely.
here, which I loved. And we've had so many discussions about that and what it looks like to be a creative without children, with children, all of those things. And so, yeah, what is that looking like for you as you figure it out these
Yeah.
days?
I'm so happy you brought it up because I wasn't sure too if you wanted to go there as well.
Oh,
And
I can go there. Yeah.
I would love to talk about that. You and I have had so many great conversations. You're one of the people that really I connected with who got the struggle of what I'm kind of going through. And I don't have an answer. I'm still trying to figure out my new writing process. And some days I think I have it figured out. I'm like, okay, this is where we're going. I feel good. And
Right.
then other days, like yesterday, I was really disheartened about everything that I'm trying to achieve because writing isn't just my whole job. It's this whole author umbrella, this whole brand, the podcast, all of that takes a lot of time too, and trying to figure out, okay, bread and butter, my career is writing books. That
Mm-hmm.
needs to always be priority. But then how do I also make time for this when I have in the background a 24/7 job? So like I'm
Yeah.
sitting here talking to you and I didn't sleep at all last night. Like my baby was up all night and I'm like,
Well,
okay, but I gotta get dressed. I gotta be on camera and
yes. Well, you look fantastic. And I'm going to make a joke because I was about to come on this podcast. I was like, I think I might be about to tell the mom of a 6-week-old that I'm really tired because I slept for 2 hours last night. I'm going through an insomnia thing, but not
oh,
because I have a child, because I'm a crazy creative. And every once in a while I go through like weeks of just like my body won't sleep and I gotta like fix it up. So like the last 3 nights I slept 2 hours. And I
oh
was like,
no.
I think I might really tell a mom.
Oh
of a
my God,
six.
no, it's all relative.
Because I had 3 bad days, so I really feel for you, and you look great.
It's all relative, and I really commiserate with you because I struggled
Yeah.
with bad insomnia too, and it's just the
Yeah.
worst.
That's the thing, like with anxiety, which is something I go in and out of, throughout my life. And sometimes it just doesn't feel like it's coming from any one thing. It's always been like this. When I was 11, when I had like nothing to worry about in my entire life, I had insomnia for like a whole summer. And I think that's just, I don't know, part of being an anxious, creative, nutty person, maybe, is that sometimes we just don't relax.
It makes me feel better though that I'm not alone in that. Even before I could
Yeah.
really relate to that. You just can't turn your brain off. We're always
Yeah.
thinking, and I think that's why we're very sensitive, precious souls. We think
Yeah, exactly.
deeply about things. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we become even more sensitive when we don't sleep. And it's like, oh God. For now, I think it's like you said a great thing that I've heard from a lot of friends who have children, which is that it changes every day. Like every time you think that you've got it hammered out, things will evolve and you have to bend with that. But
Mhm.
I don't know if you're interested in this. I love like kind of the nitty gritty of like, how do people who have a lot going on in their life, whether that's they're caretaking a parent, they have a child, like whatever it is, these demands
Yes.
in our lives, like what is the nitty gritty of like what that looks like for you right now? Like when you're here with me, like is that you have a co-parent obviously of your husband, like is your baby with him? How do you guys divide things? Do you have outside help? Like what is the real like breakdown of what it looks
Yeah.
like to like get creative time when you're a parent?
It's such a good question. And it's so true. And a really good point that you hit on, first of all, is that this isn't new. I'm not the first person or the last person to have a baby, or even if you don't have a kid, you have a full-time job. There's so many things pulling at our attention
Mm-hmm.
away from writing and working on a manuscript. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm definitely not unique in this circumstance. It's just new to me and it's all relative. And so for me, this is the season of life that I'm navigating. But the nitty-gritty, every day is so different. And for someone like me who's very type A, I
Yeah.
need to know where I'm going. I'm a planner, and with a newborn, and I'm only like 6 weeks into this, every day is different. And I have to have a sense of letting go of my and almost mourning that past self. So right now, my husband, Jeff, he luckily is on paternity leave, but on Monday in a couple days, he's going back to work. And we just
Okay.
had this conversation of how the hell are we going to do this when right now this is my work? So he's with the baby. He took him for a walk, actually. I heard them come home, but he's not crying right now, which is good.
Good. Yeah.
But again, I was like, okay, there might be a crying baby in the background of this podcast because that's just where I am. I'm recording this from home. I do have to breastfeed him every 2 to 3 hours. So
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go breastfeed right after. And right before I came on, I was breastfeeding him so
Yep.
that he was good for the 2 hours. Normally, I would structure my day where I would wake up in the morning. I also am like you. I love to have my coffee before my brain even has time to wake up
Yeah.
and tell me this is the worst idea, all the
Yep.
self-doubt.
Totally in with that.
I'm
Yeah.
still in that fog and I can just dive into the
Yes.
manuscript and I will go all the way till lunch. Then usually
Yeah.
I would go for a walk or a run around lunchtime to
Mhm.
let all the words sink in. And then I
Yeah.
would come back to it in the afternoon. And then I would stop and meet someone like you at the Annex Hotel for a
Yeah.
cocktail or a martini for happy hour. And maybe even in the evening, go back and slowly edit because I
Yeah.
loved it that much
Yeah.
and I would get so invested. And now part of me mourning that I loved those days. Those were my
Yeah.
favorite days. And I
Yeah.
don't see when I will be able to do that again. Now I have really short windows,
Yeah.
and it takes me that long to kind of get back into the flow of the book.
Right.
So I'm figuring it out, and I'm having to learn how to write quickly, how to get back into the story quickly. And this is all about when I'm drafting a new book.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting just for people who, whether they are, because I'm sure a lot of your listeners are parents or want to be
Mhm.
parents or what, like we said, like have caretaking responsibilities in their life or whatever it is. And so just like knowing that you're not going to have it figured out from the jump. But I do think that like, yeah, just figuring out a way that like, this is the amount of time I have. I think you will be able to do that because I believe so much in the maxim of like, if you want something done, ask a busy person to do it. Right now, it's a big
1000%.
transition. Right now, you've got to be able to grieve, your old life and the old you, but you will figure out how to get it done in those moments. And that will be really rewarding too, because I think even this will not be your life forever. There is a day when you are going to sleep again, where you're going to have longer than 2 hours uninterrupted. He's going to grow up. You're going to spend a whole day writing and loving it and missing him and all of the things. But by then you'll be more efficient too. Like you'll be like, I know how to write when I have a whole day. And
Yeah.
I know how to do it when I have 2 hours. And that's such a skill I think that you'll experience too. I always like to talk about that sort of thing because I think that lots of people are feeling like, is it only me or will I ever be able to adapt?
Yes. And I know you said it
Yeah.
so well. It's not like this is going to be my life forever. It's going to
Yep.
change when he goes to school. Again, I'm going to have to rejig my routine
Yep.
next week, next
Yep.
month, in a few years from now. It's just also my brain chemistry changing. I will say that is one of the silver linings is that I am, once I have those hours, very efficient in
Yeah.
that time. In a way, it's been a blessing in disguise. It's forced me to not languish as much.
Hmm.
But I do miss kind of the aimless wander, even on my walks, of
Yeah.
letting my mind go to the manuscript or to future books.
Yeah.
Whereas now that brain space wanders to my baby and everything. I'm responsible for him. So the part of my brain that was there for creativity, I feel like is getting filled up with other things. And it's not bad. It's just figuring it all out.
By the way, it's okay to like, I know you know this, but like it's okay to be sad about that. I feel like it's so people, women face, we won't get me on my soapbox, this podcast is already long, but like women face so much, critique of every decision, no matter what you do with your life, your body, your whatever. And I hate adding to that the idea that we're not grateful if we seem sad because I know you are and like I know who you are and I know what you've been through and it's okay like to be sad about creativity being sucked up by other things at the exact same time that you are infinitely joyful about whatever it is with your son. So
I do feel I always have to add a disclaimer,
yeah.
and I wish I didn't because I also deserve
Yes.
to have a mourning period without it being one or the other.
Well, I think you don't. I am here on the Word Weaver podcast saying that I firmly believe that people and women need no disclaimers to experience being a person. We are all out here doing our best. And if you know what, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't understand that someone could hold two truths or two emotions at once, because that's what writers and readers are people who understand that having one really strong emotion does not mean that the rest of your life is something that is irrelevant or that, you don't care about.
So beautifully said. You should be a writer.
You
Yeah.
too.
Do you mind if I ask you about your kind of views and journey with choosing to have children, choosing to lead a childless path, and how that relates to your creative life?
Absolutely. So I personally do not want or plan to have biological children, as you know. That's something that my husband and I are today aligned on. I always like to say life is long. I'm not somebody that's dogmatic about not having children or having children, but it has felt right and felt true to me
Mhm.
since I was 18 or 20 years old, and I'm in my 30s and I'm, been married and I've published books and I've done all the things that people say that if you've done this, then you're going to want, you're going to want to have kids. And I don't. I am happily today not very in conflict about that. That I have gone through a lot of questioning because I do think that it is still very much the script that, women should have children, women want children, no matter what else you're doing in your life, being a mother is the most important job.
Yeah.
Here to refute that, just feeling like it has never truly fit me. And that's also though why our conversations have meant so much to me is because I think it's so important to meet other people and especially other women who always wanted kids, who never
Mhm.
wanted kids, and then who just don't know. Like there are so many paths to figuring this out. And I think that I loved seeing you go through the notion, if I may say, of like, no, I didn't feel like I was sitting here being like, yes, I was always sure I wanted kids. This is always where my life was heading.
Yeah.
And we should keep doing this podcast and do a study on us because we're two people who felt very similar ways. And, you have gone into this beautiful journey of motherhood and
Yes.
it's incredible. And by the way, you're still so you. I'm talking to you 6 weeks later. I want you to know, even if you don't feel like it right now,
Thank you.
even if you have a beautiful
So
new
nice.
dimension, you're still you. You're the same person. You're going to be fine. But then for me, we were in that space together and I am still, going forward on the, planning not to have kids track. And I think that's going to be so interesting to continue to dialogue about and be honest about because I don't expect to never have a doubt or a regret in my life about not having kids. But I think it's the only decision that we're expected to be 100% bought in on. Like everybody, there's not a thing you can do in your life that you're never going to have a moment of doubt or upset about. And that includes having children. You are allowed to doubt it and be frustrated and upset about it some days. And
Yes.
not having children. What, because I regret it one time means it's not the right thing. Some days I regret deciding to write another book. It doesn't, but it's
Yeah.
true to me and it's the right thing. And you've got to just believe in yourself and go in the direction of your purpose. And that's what this has felt like to me. And
Oh,
I'm going to keep doing that.
100%. Our conversations have meant so much to me as well. And there was actually an article that just came out. It was author R.O. Kwan,
Yes. Ooh, yeah.
and it was about parents who regret having kids. But she was shedding light on that people really think it's taboo because who says
Yeah.
out loud, I
Yeah.
regret having children? And really fascinating read. I'll make sure to leave the link in the show notes. But
Yeah.
like you said, we're kind of, you and I, a bit of a case study of I chose to go one way and you chose to go the other. And I want to be really clear too of I fully, and you and I talked about this, and I still could envision my life in two
Yeah.
different ways and be happy with both of those outcomes.
Yes, because things grow from what you decide. If everyone shout out, read Who We Are Now, selfish shout out. But that's really the denouement, like the big monologue at the end that I won't spoil from one of the characters' perspectives is that she spends so much of her life going, what if I hadn't come here? What if this hadn't happened to me? What would, and the answer is like, it doesn't matter because the way you go, the longer and longer you go down a path, it starts to feel not only right and true to you, but like it was inevitable.
Yeah.
So for me, like if I had children, I am certain this is in the book, like they would not only be beautiful and beloved, but I would have felt like it was inevitable. Like I was always going that way. I can't believe I almost missed this.
Yes.
I'm going to feel that way about this path of my life too. All of the horrible and all of the great moments when I'm living some phenomenal moment, you know, just on my own, living my creative process. I have that often. I'm like, I can't believe that I'd be missing this if I had a kid. And if I had a kid, I would write all kinds of beautiful different things and feel all kinds of beautiful different things. So like neither of them are sad to
Yep.
me. They are simply different and you can't live the life you didn't live. There's a really, you know Cheryl Strayed, right? And Dear
Yes.
Sugar. Yeah. She has a very beautiful advice column that I'd love to shoot you also. Maybe we can put it in the show notes. But she writes to a man who he and his partner are deciding at about 40 whether or not to like get the last train to having a biological kid. And she
Oh,
goes, I can't know, and neither can you, what would have happened in the life you didn't choose. It's the ghost ship that didn't carry you. All you can do is salute it from the shore. And I've always thought that's one of the most beautiful
oh,
things. Yeah,
I just got chills. I really
right.
did. That is so beautiful. I'm gonna have to read that. Is it her
Yeah,
Dear Sugar column?
it is, and it's an old one too. I'll find it for you. But basically, like that's
Yeah.
what you have to think about anything, whether it's the job taken or the job not taken, the person married or the single life. Like all of it is the ghost ship that didn't carry you. Salute it and keep digging where you're planted, basically.
There's pros and cons to everything, but
Yeah,
it's enjoy this beautiful
yeah,
life that you've chosen. You live kind of my dream life right now, a writer in Brooklyn, having
yeah.
martinis, like rubbing elbows with your favorite authors. That is so beautiful, but I
Yes,
might even still get to live that life for 2 weeks if I
absolutely.
want.
And you
And
could come on down to New York, come get a fabulous hotel room when, you know, he's a little older and, you know, we'll do the whole single writer in New York thing. It's never over.
exactly, yeah. And another thing, now I'm really excited. I never had this vision before of bringing him to my book launches and having him
Yes.
there to celebrate and see kind of who his mother is as a
Yes.
person as
Yeah.
well.
I love that. I think that's going to be so special and beautiful. And this is a joke. I'm joking, listeners, but kind of. I literally sometimes I'm like, should I have a kid so that they can see that I write books? Like I not really, and I'm like a pretty cool person to have as a mom. Like, should I maybe like I think that'd be who doesn't want to grow up as the kid of an author? Everyone, because we're incredibly creative and passionate and distracted.
Yeah, exactly.
But
I
no,
know.
no.
Oh my God.
But it's funny. But no, I think that will be like such a special thing is to share all of those sides of you with yet another person who loves you.
We could go on and on about this because it really is kind of
We
at
could.
the heart of humanity, not to get like so
Yeah.
deep about it, but
Oh, it's true.
there's
Well,
a
let's do a part two. You know, anytime you have other people on, you can wrap, but we can do a part two too. Like I said, always interested in talking about, you know, literary drama or pop culture stuff or, you know, motherhood and work, like female friendship. All of those things are really like core to my books and my interests.
truly love talking to you. And can you give us any hints of what you're working on right now and what we can expect for your third book?
Sure. Yes, I will do it. Okay. So I am working on my third right now. I can't say that much about it, but you know what? I will give some hints because I do feel really confident in this direction and that this book is ultimately happening, whatever the timeline. It is essentially, I want to call it a European second chance romance with a fortune teller twist. I want to, like, the comps right now are, I think, One Day meets The Immortalists. It's a more
Oh,
romantic book than I've ever done, but it still spans about 15 years, two people who meet on a study abroad program in Paris when they're 20 and are kind of weave in and out of each other's lives over time. And there is a little bit of a prophecy about whether or not they may be each other's soulmates or not. So a little bit of fun, little darkness and seriousness, because that's always in my books, and we'll see.
oh my God, I love everything you put out. So this sounds right up my alley.
You. And you know, I mean, I've also hinted to you the other book that I don't know if might be my fourth. I also have like a wine world book that's in, I'm very passionate about wine. That's also in progress, but I think we're doing this one first. So
Yeah.
stay tuned, but that's also coming.
And for that book, you have to go to Bordeaux and live there, and I have to come visit you while you're writing.
Obviously, we have to do it. Yeah, I lived in Bordeaux once before, in 2017 when I was writing the first book. And I would love to go back and also write it off on my taxes. So
That's one of the best things about being a writer is you can pick where you want your books to
yes,
be set, and then you have to go live there,
I know.
part of the research, and write it off in your taxes.
Exactly. I'm setting everything in France from now on because this third one is in France too. Like it's not the Wine World book at all, but it's also, still kind of similar setting. So that's a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
Two final things. How do you take your martini? And then let everybody know where we can find you, buy all of your books, follow you online, all that good stuff.
Perfect question. So I love many different types of martinis, and I'm always interested in a bar's like favorite twist on the classic. But if I'm making it at home or if I'm ordering for somebody at a bar, I am a dry gin martini, up with a twist, and the secret is a little bit of orange bitters, 3 to 6 orange bitters, and I like a 3-to-1 ratio on the gin to vermouth.
You introduced me to the world of martinis. I didn't like them before. It was an acquired taste. It was like sushi. It took me a long time to love it.
Yep.
Obsessed, and that's all because of you.
Well, thank you. Well, my point of pride is that I think I can get any person to like a martini. I had a friend that I was having drinks with a little bit ago, and she's like, I just don't like them. But she'd really only had dirty or like olive-based martinis, whether with gin or with vodka. And I did the gin with the orange bitters and the twist. And then I told them to go a little bit wet, just like 2-to-1 on the gin to vermouth, and she loved it. So
Yeah.
this is my point of pride. I'm like, I can tailor a martini for any person.
You have a new career on the side.
Yeah.
And then where can everyone connect with you?
So I am on Instagram at LaurynJC. I post a variety of mostly just my life, but also some book and writing stuff, and obviously updates when I have a new book coming out. My website, which I desperately need to refresh, maybe saying this will make me do it, laurenchamberlain.com. And yeah, I think those are the two best places. But my DMs are always open, my email's open. I love to hear from people. If you want to talk about any of the subjects we touched on today, reach out.
And you can always buy her books, Friends from Home and Who We Are Now.
Thank you wherever books are sold. I like to
Yes,
say. Yes.
exactly. Lauryn,
Awesome.
thank you so much for being the first guest. I appreciate it more than you know, and I always cherish our conversations online, offline, and you're just one of a kind. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much to you. Your readers and listeners are so lucky to have you, and we'll talk more soon.